Have you ever walked into a pub and just stumbled upon it? That circle of musicians, feet tapping, instruments humming, all locked into this sound that's, well, it's like beautiful, organized chaos. That, my friends, is an Irish music session. And today, we're going to crack the code. Because what looks like a spontaneous jam session is actually this incredible story of tradition, technology, and a whole lot of unwritten rules.
You know, at first glance, it just looks like a bunch of friends having a good time. But the anthropologist Adam R. Cole really hit the nail on the head here. Underneath that super casual vibe is a deep, really complex world of etiquette, social cues, and a history that's way more modern than you'd think. It's a social event, a living tradition, and a musical puzzle all rolled into one.
So how in the world does it work? I mean, how can musicians who've maybe never even met before sit down and play together so perfectly? What's the secret handshake? And how did this whole thing even get started? Well, that's exactly what we're here to figure out.
To really get what's happening in that pub corner today, we actually have to take a step back. We're going back to the middle of the 20th century, to a time when, believe it or not, this music was on the verge of completely dying out.
This revival basically happened in three major waves. It kicked off in 1951 when a group of musicians, seeing the tradition fading, formed Commercialization to literally save it. Then, in the 60s, you get this brilliant composer, Sion O'Riordan. He takes these old tunes and arranges them for what was basically a folk orchestra, turning them into art you'd sit and listen to in a concert hall. And right out of his group came the Chieftains, who took that sound and, well, they made it a global sensation.
And this was a massive shift in thinking. See, before the revival, the music was almost always for dancing. The tune existed to serve the steps. But guys like O'Riordan completely flipped the script. They said, no, wait, the music itself is a treasure. It's something to be listened to be savored. And that one idea, that's the key to understanding how we ended up with the modern session.
Okay, so the music has been saved, and people are now treating it as an art form for listening. So where does it go? The stage was set for a whole new kind of venue, and you might be picturing an ancient rural cottage, but the real birthplace of the session is way more modern and a lot more urban.
That's right, and this blows a lot of people's minds. The pub session is not some ancient Celtic tradition. It really got its start with Irish immigrants in cities like London. I mean, think about it. You can't exactly have a loud music session in your tiny flat without the neighbors calling the police. So the pub became the natural place to go. And it was only after World War II that this whole idea migrated back to Ireland and really took off.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Technology itself had a huge hand in shaping the sound. See, back in the day, a musician might just play one tune over and over for as long as people were dancing. But the first records, the 78s, could only hold about 3 minutes of audio. And listening to one short jig repeated for 3 minutes straight on your gramophone was, well, it was kind of boring. So the record companies, looking to sell records, started bundling 2 or 3 tunes together in a medley. And that medley format, what we now call a set, became the absolute bedrock of the session.
Okay, so all the pieces are almost there. Then, a couple more things happen that create the perfect storm. You have the American folk revival, which brings new instruments like the guitar and bouzouki into the mix. And at the exact same time, you get this huge tourism boom in Ireland in the 70s. Suddenly, you have busloads of people showing up in towns looking for that authentic Irish music experience. Pub owners figured it out pretty quick. Music is good for business. And just like that, the weekly paid pub session was born.
All right, so we've got the history down. Let's go back to the pub. The musicians are in the circle, the tunes are starting. How do you fit in? What are those unwritten rules that keep this whole thing from falling apart?
First up, the do's. And the number one rule, above all else, is listen. Just listen. A session is a musical conversation, not a competition. Don't even think about picking up your instrument until you hear a tune you know inside and out. Follow the speed and the volume of whoever kicked off the tune. They're the boss for that set. And remember, it's a social gathering for the musicians, not a concert for an audience. A little clap or a quiet well done after a set is great, but that's it.
And the don'ts are just as important. The fastest way to get the evil eye is to try and show off by playing a bunch of weird tunes nobody's ever heard of. The whole point is to play together. Don't try to hijack the tune by playing louder or trying to speed things up. And please, for the love of everything, don't walk up to the circle and ask for Danny Boy. They're not a jukebox. The music comes from within the circle for the circle.
Now, if you listen really closely, you might notice something. They're not all playing the exact same notes. And you're right, that's not a mistake. That's the magic. It's a concept called heterophony. The best way to think about it is like this. Imagine everyone in the circle agrees to draw a picture of a cat. You're all going to draw the same basic thing, right? 4 legs, a tail, whiskers, but every single drawing is going to be a little bit different with its own unique style. That's a session. Same melody, but everyone adds their own little bit of personality. It's what gives the music that incredibly rich, layered sound.
So what are you going to see in that circle? Well, your core melody instruments are usually the fiddle, the flute, tin whistle, and accordion. And you'll almost always see a bodhran, that Irish frame drum, providing the rhythmic heartbeat. But over the years, a lot of other instruments have found their place, like the guitar, bouzouki, and tenor banjo, often playing rhythm and adding all this wonderful texture.
And what are they playing? Well, you'll hear a few main types of tunes. The most common are reels. They're fast, with a kind of flowing, driving feel. Then you have jigs, which have that classic bouncy kind of skipping rhythm that makes you want to dance. And then there are polkas, which are super fast and have this really punchy, off-the-beat feel. Once you know what to listen for, you can start to tell them apart.
Okay, so this brings us to the big, thorny question that kind of hangs over the modern session, especially in touristy areas. When money gets involved, does the whole thing lose its soul?
You know, a lot of people, when they find out the musicians are being paid by the pub, feel a little let down. It can feel like that spontaneous magic is really just a performance put on for them. But the reality on the ground is way more complicated than that.
To really get this, we have to understand the difference between two big ideas: commercialization and commodification. They sound alike, but they're worlds apart. Commercialization is just the fact that money is involved. And let's be honest, musicians have always been paid with a few pints or a bit of cash for their skill. Commodification, on the other hand, is when the musicians lose creative control, when the music is only valuable because someone's paying for it and the musicians are told what to play.
And that is the absolute key to everything: control. In the vast, vast majority of these paid sessions, the pub owner isn't buying a playlist. They're paying a few core musicians to show up and guarantee that music happens. They're the anchor. But they are not telling those musicians what tunes to play, how fast to play them, or who else can join the circle. The musicians still have total control over the music itself.
So even if there's money on the table, the core purpose of the session is still intact. It's a social event for the musicians, first and foremost. It's an experience that they share with each other. And as an audience, we just get the incredible privilege of being in the room while it happens.
When you get right down to it, the Irish session is this amazing story of how a tradition can be a living, breathing thing. It's not a fragile artifact in a museum. It adapts. It absorbs new instruments, new technologies, new economic realities. It's constantly balancing the pressures from the outside world with the rules of its own inner circle. And it leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. In a world that's always changing, what does it really mean for any tradition to stay authentic?